Imagine this for a second. You're running a company, a really critical technical team.
Okay.
And you have this one position that's been open for, say, 6 months.
Painful. I've been there.
Exactly. The team is drowning, everyone's overworked, deadlines are just slipping away.
The pressure is immense.
Then finally this candidate walks in.
Yeah.
And they are brilliant. I mean, the resume is perfect. Technical skills are completely off the charts.
The unicorn. The person you've been waiting for.
Yes. They could solve your immediate scaling problems in, like, a week. But there's a catch.
There's always a catch.
They have this slight tendency to, question the rules. Not in a malicious way, just they like to negotiate. They see processes as guidelines.
The brilliant jerk archetype, almost.
Almost. Now, in 99% of companies, we hire that person, right? We take the talent and we figure, we'll manage the personality.
In almost every organization I have ever seen, yes.
Yep.
You hire for the capability and you
Yeah.
deal with the ego. You tell yourself, I can fix the culture fit later.
Exactly. But today, we are looking at a company that says doing that is not just a mistake.
Yeah.
It is a mathematical guarantee of failure. We are doing a deep dive into Roxy Systems.
And their philosophy is, it's something else.
It's terrifyingly simple is what it is. They state very explicitly that they would rather leave a position unfilled indefinitely
forever.
than hire a brilliant person who doesn't fit a very specific, almost mechanical psychological profile.
It's a fascinating case study. We've got this huge stack of their internal documents here, their whole hiring philosophy, interview frameworks, even a guide to something they call reconceptualization.
Right.
And what's so striking is that they don't talk about hiring in the way we're used to. It's not team building or culture fit in that fluffy, HR speak way.
No, we're family posters on the wall.
No, they talk about it as organizational physics.
Physics. That is a heavy word for human resources.
Yeah.
Usually HR is about vibes. This sounds harder.
It is much, much harder. But it starts to make sense when you understand what ROXY actually builds. They call it substrate infrastructure.
Substrate infrastructure. Okay, break that down.
Think of systems like Cosmos or CMOS. These aren't just consumer apps where, if a button doesn't work, you just refresh the page.
Right.
These are the foundational layers. They enforce truth in data for huge global systems.
So if they mess up, it's not, oops, the image didn't load. Is, oops, millions of dollars just vanished.
Exactly. They describe their own product as digital geology.
Digital geology.
It's the ground you're standing on. And the ground cannot have an opinion. The ground cannot lie. So their whole thesis is, you cannot build a system that tells the truth if your organization is built on a foundation of socialized negotiation.
Right. And that's the mission for our deep dive today. We're going to unpack how you build a system that literally cannot lie. And honestly, we have to ask what the extreme human costs are to maintain something like that.
It's a huge question.
Because I was reading through these files, and I just kept thinking to myself, could I survive working here? And the answer is probably no. I don't think I could.
It's definitely not for everyone. The central premise here is that most organizations, they rot from the inside out.
Yeah.
ROXY calls this phenomenon coherence decay. And they claim to have identified exactly how it happens, and at least in theory, how to stop it using this physics approach.
Okay, so let's unpack that, this coherence decay. Because their documents, they paint a pretty grim picture of the normal corporate life cycle. They basically say most companies start dying the moment they hire their very first negotiator.
That's the core of it. And it starts with what they call the physics of decay.
Yeah.
The main thesis is that hiring isn't a growth function. It's not about getting bigger.
It's a defense mechanism.
It's a coherence preservation mechanism. So in a normal company, you have rules, right? But eventually someone questions a rule. Some smart engineer says, hey, why do we need this validation step? It slows us down by, couple milliseconds. I can bypass it and ship this feature today.
Which, to be fair, is usually a quality we reward. We are taught to question inefficiencies. We put move fast and break things on posters in the office.
In a consumer app, sure, speed is life. But in one of these substrate systems, where the constraints are enforced mechanically, not just culturally, that kind of skepticism, it spreads like a contagion. Yeah. ROXY argues that once a constraint becomes questionable, it effectively becomes negotiable.
Right.
And once a hard constraint is negotiable, the system is no longer deterministic. It's just a suggestion.
Just this once. That seems to be the phrase they fear more than anything.
Just this once is the death knell. It's the beginning of the end. because it's not about that one single bypass. It's about network dynamics.
What do you mean by that?
Well, one person questioning a rule, that changes the conversation in the room. Two people questioning it, now you have a coalition.
And 5 people.
5 people change the culture.
And they have actual math on this, which I have to say, it terrified me a little bit. They talk about a 75% threshold.
This is the organizational physics part. It gets really specific. They claim you need roughly 75% of your staff to be what they call constraint respecters to maintain coherence.
So 3 out of 4 people have to be totally on board.
At a minimum. If you drop below that, say you have 60% respecters and 40% negotiators, they say the decay becomes irreversible.
Why irreversible, though? I mean, why can't the 60% just convince the 40% to get back in line? You still have the majority.
Because it's something they call asymmetric conversion. And this is a brilliant, if depressing, insight from their documents.
Asymmetric conversion.
They argue that skeptics convert believers much, much faster than believers can ever convert skeptics.
Why does that happen? What's the mechanism there?
Well, just think about human psychology for a second. Questioning rules feels intellectually honest.
Right, it feels smart.
It feels smart. It feels like you're saying, why are we following these old rules? We should optimize this. We should be flexible. That appeals directly to the engineer's brain. It signals high status. I am independent, I think, for myself.
Whereas saying, no, we must follow the process because it is the process.
Exactly. That sounds bureaucratic. It sounds boring. It makes you sound like a sheep just following orders.
So the social gravity, it always pulls toward negotiation.
Always. Skepticism is contagious because it feels like liberation. Adherence to the rules feels like drudgery.
So if you hire that brilliant negotiator we talked about at the very beginning,
You are introducing a super spreader event for this decay. Even if they are an absolute genius, they lower the concentration of constraint respecters.
and if you hire enough of them.
You cross that 75% threshold, and the organization fundamentally breaks. The physics of the system turn into politics, and that's why they reject that brilliant candidate.
Right.
A brilliant negotiator is infinitely more dangerous to them than an unfilled seat.
Okay, so that really sets the stakes. They're absolutely terrified of this rot. So how do they actually filter for this? I mean, every company says they hire for integrity or culture fit, but usually that just means I liked having a beer with this person.
Right.
ROXY seems to be doing something very, very different in their interview process.
It's night and day. First off, they have this really strict rule. Absolute standards versus ranking.
What does that mean?
Well, most companies, they'll interview 5 people, and then they hire the best one of the bunch.
They're grading on a curve.
Exactly. ROXY says no, absolutely not. They have a threshold, a bar. If you meet it, you pass. If nobody meets it in a given month, they hire nobody.
So they're not comparing candidates to each other.
Never. They explicitly accept the cost of slowness. They view that empty seat as a capacity problem, which is, it's painful, but it's survivable.
But the wrong hire.
The wrong hire is an integrity problem, and to them, that is fatal.
And they don't do those puzzle interviews, right?
Yeah.
How many golf balls fit in a 747? I've always hated those things.
None of that. Their document, the interview framework, is very clear on this. Real work in real systems. They ban toy problems.
So what does that mean in practice?
It means if you interview there, you are working in the actual ROXY codebase, Cosmos or CMOS.
Wait, but how can you possibly work on a complex code base you've never seen before? I mean, that sounds like you're setting someone up to fail immediately.
And that's part of the point. They send you the onboarding documents 24 to 48 hours before the interview.
So you have homework.
You have homework. You essentially have to join the company for 2 days before you even speak to a human being.
Wow. That is a huge ask. You're asking a candidate to do what is essentially unpaid labor, or at least unpaid study, for 2 whole days just for a chance at an interview.
It is a huge ask, and that's the very first filter. If you aren't curious enough about substrate infrastructure to read the manual, you are not going to survive the job.
Okay.
But it also serves this other, more important purpose. They want to see how you handle the vulnerability of not knowing everything. They want to see you struggle.
They want you to struggle.
In fact, the document explicitly states, and this is a quote, "Design this session to induce struggle."
That sounds, I don't know, almost sadistic. Why would you want someone to struggle in an interview?
Because they're testing for what they call recovery patterns. When you get stuck, and you will get stuck because the system is incredibly complex, what do?
Right.
Do you panic? Do you try to bluff your way through it and pretend you know the library? Or do you methodically explore the problem? Do you check the logs? Do you ask a clarifying question?
So it's about your emotional regulation as much as it is about your coding ability.
Precisely. If you panic in an interview because you don't know a library, you're going to panic in production when the system breaks and there's real money on the line. They are looking for a very specific kind of calm under pressure.
There is another detail in here that I found really intense and, well, honestly, a little bit creepy. The recorded evidence. Every single interview is recorded.
Every single one, audio and your screen capture. And then it's scored against a detailed rubric by multiple independent reviewers who weren't even in the room for the live interview.
That feels like a surveillance state, like Big Brother is watching your interview. Why would you go to that length?
They say it's to prevent something called narrative retrofitting.
Narrative retrofitting.
You know how it is. You interview someone, and maybe you find out they went to the same college as you, or you both happen to love 80s synth pop. You subconsciously decide you like them.
And then my brain just ignores the fact that they couldn't write a basic SQL query to save their life.
Exactly. You make up reasons for why they're great. You say, oh, they're a great culture fit, they're a fast learner. ROXY says no. They go to the tape.
To the evidence.
To the evidence. The reviewer just asks, did the candidate exhibit blame externalization at minute 45? Yes or no? It's designed to strip away all of that social bias and look only at the behavior.
You mentioned blame externalization. Let's talk about the specific tracks and the psychological traits they're measuring, because they have names for these roles that sound like they're from a sci-fi novel.
They really do. They have track A, which is the invariant thinker.
Okay.
These are your non-technical roles, project managers, operations folks. They test if these people really understand trade-offs. Can they understand that a guarantee is a guarantee, not a suggestion? But the engineers, they're on track B.
Right, track B1 and B2.
Right. Track B1 is the substrate steward. These are the builders. Their focus is on reliability, navigating complexity, and not breaking things. But then there's track B2.
The substrate inventor.
The inventors. These are the really senior people. And they aren't just tested on their coding. They're tested on whether they can find flaws in ROXY's own design.
So they're asked to critique the system itself.
Exactly. They give him these incredibly hard problems like distributed tombstone consensus.
Which sounds like a heavy metal band, but I'm going to assume it's a very hard technical problem.
It is a very hard problem. It's all about how you delete data in a massive distributed system without it coming back to life due to network lag. They want to see if these candidates can reason about physics, not just about code.
But the real filter, the hard filter as they call it, it isn't really the code, is it? It's this concept of behavioral integrity.
This is the whole ball game. This is the hard filter. This is where they reject that brilliant jerk we talked about. They list these very specific automatic disqualifiers.
Like what?
Well, one is blame externalization, which we just touched on. If a candidate says, oh, the tool is broken, or this documentation is total garbage, instead of, I don't understand how this works.
That's a red flag.
It's a huge red flag.
But hang on a second. I mean, sometimes documentation is garbage. Sometimes the tools are broken. Is it really fair to penalize someone for just pointing that out?
In most companies, no, it probably isn't fair. But in a substrate environment, this digital geology they're building, your first instinct must be humility.
Why?
Because if you assume the system is wrong every time you hit a wall, you're going to try to bypass the system. You're going to hack around it. ROXY needs people whose first instinct is always, I am the most likely error term here.
That requires a massive, massive lack of ego.
It absolutely does. Another disqualifier is what they call defensive rigidity.
Okay.
If you get stressed, do you clamp down? Do you get defensive and refuse to listen to feedback? If the answer is yes, you're out.
Because when the system actually goes down for real?
They can't have someone on the team who is defensive. They need someone who stays curious, even under immense pressure.
There's a distinction they make here that I found just absolutely love it. It's the pragmatist versus the zealot.
Yeah.
Because you would think, given all this talk about absolute constraints in physics, that they would want zealots. They'd want people who treat the company handbook like it's a Bible.
And that is the central paradox of their entire system. They explicitly say in their hiring guide, do not hire the zealot.
Why not? I mean, isn't a zealot exactly what they want? Someone who would never, ever break the rules.
No, because of what they call the noble lie. Or my favorite phrasing, policy masquerading as physics.
Policy masquerading as physics.
ROXY describes its rules, like, for example, the 35 meters constant for validation, as if they are inevitable laws of nature. The system demands this, but in reality, it's just code.
It's a choice.
It's a choice. A brilliant choice, maybe, but a choice made by a human being.
So the zealot, they believe it's actually physics. They believe it's real.
Right. They buy into the mythology completely, and then when the zealot eventually peeks behind the curtain, maybe they get promoted and see the config files, and they realize, wait a minute, this is just a setting. We could change this.
They feel betrayed.
They feel lied to. They burn out. They become cynical, which is even worse than being a skeptic from the start.
And we already know the skeptic is out from day one because they try to negotiate everything immediately.
Exactly. The skeptic is the agent of decay.
So that just leaves the pragmatist.
The pragmatist is the target hire. The pragmatist is the unicorn they're searching for.
Yeah.
This is the person who looks at the rule, and they know it's technically arbitrary. They know the speed limit on the highway is just a sign someone put up. But they say, I understand that for the system as a whole to work, for traffic to flow safely, we must all treat this as if it were physics. I will accept the constraint to maintain the coherence of the system.
They hold the duality in their minds.
Yes, they can hold both thoughts. This is engineered, it is artificial in a sense, but I will enforce it absolutely. It's a social contract. They play the game not because they're blind to the rules, but because they know the game is what keeps the lights on.
That is such a nuanced psychological target to hit in a hiring process. I want you to be smart enough to see the lie, but disciplined enough to live by it.
It's the definition of social contract theory, but applied directly to software engineering, and it is incredibly, incredibly rare.
Okay, so let's say against all odds, you find this pragmatist. You hire them, now you have to onboard them. And I'm guessing ROXY's onboarding isn't just, here's your laptop and the HR handbook.
Not even close. They call it immersion, not instruction. Their core belief is this. You cannot teach constraints via slideshows.
Okay.
You can't just tell a smart engineer, don't bypass the validation. They have to feel the pain of it.
Feel the pain.
Literally. Phase one of their onboarding is called constraint encounter. They want the new hire to hit the wall. They want them to try to push some code, have the system reject it, and feel the frustration of the immutable audit trail blocking their quick fix.
Again, this sounds a little bit like hazing. Welcome to the team. Here's a brick wall to bang your head against for a few hours.
It does sound like that. But ROXY argues that discomfort is information.
Discomfort is information.
Until you feel the constraint physically stopping you, until you are sitting there at 7 p.m., unable to merge your code because of a rule you don't fully understand. You don't respect the rule. You just think of it as a guideline.
So they want you to internalize the physics of the system.
They want you to fear the error message in a healthy way.
And what comes after you've hit the wall? What's phase two?
Phase two is constraint understanding. Once you're frustrated, once you've felt the pain, then they pair you with a mentor who explains why that wall exists.
Ah, so the context comes later.
The context follows the conflict. The mentor says, look, we blocked you because if we let that change through, we would have a stale read in the database and a customer would lose $10 million.
So it's struggle first, explanation second.
Correct. And then phase three is what they call constraint fluency. This is where the new hire starts catching themselves before they even try to break a rule. But all along, the managers are watching for specific teaching moments.
And let me guess, the biggest one is the just this once moment.
That is the big one. The moment a new hire says, in a meeting or on Slack, hey, can we just skip the linker verification for this one deploy? It's really urgent.
That's the test.
That is the crucial moment. And the manager has to intervene immediately, not to punish the person, but to distinguish. They have to ask a very specific question. Are you negotiating or are you curious?
What is the difference between the two?
Well, negotiation is, let's skip this. Curiosity is, why is it designed this way? Curiosity is welcome. Curiosity leads to deeper understanding.
Negotiation.
Negotiation is the beginning of the end. It is the first tiny crack in the hull of the ship.
This all sounds incredibly rigid. And honestly, if I were working there, I would start to worry about the company becoming a museum, you know?
Right.
If you can never break the rules, if the physics are set in stone, how do you ever improve? How do you innovate? The world changes. If ROXY doesn't change with it, won't it just die?
That is the central paradox they identify. They call it calcification versus erosion.
Calcification versus erosion.
If your constraints are truly immutable, you calcify. You become a dinosaur. But if they change too easily, you erode and become a chaotic, broken mess.
So how do they solve for that? How do they walk that tightrope?
They have a very specific formal mechanism called the reconceptualization layer. And honestly, this is the part of their system that convinced me this isn't just a cult. It's a living system.
The reconceptualization layer, it sounds like something out of the Matrix.
It practically is. It's a formal protocol to change the unchangeable. Here's how it works. ROXY separates the contexts.
The
So
context.
in production context, which is your daily work, writing code, shipping features, the rules are physics. They are non-negotiable. You cannot argue with gravity while you are flying the plane.
Okay, that makes sense.
But they create a totally separate reconceptualization context.
Mm.
And in this special context, the rules are just proposals. They are debatable. It's a designated safe space to question the physics.
So you can debate gravity, but only in the designated debating room.
Exactly. And the bar to even enter that room is incredibly high. You have to have been at the company for at least 6 months. You have to prove you understand the current design deeply, and you have to follow the protocol.
Walk us through the protocol. I'm guessing you can't just raise your hand in a meeting and say, I have a new idea.
No, that's just noise. First, you have to write a private inquiry document, and it has to be titled Why X Exists.
Why X exists.
So if you want to change that 35 meteors constant, you first have to write a paper proving you understand exactly why it was set to 35 meters in the first place. You have to honor Chesterton's fence. Don't tear down a fence until you know why it was built.
That immediately filters out anyone who just thinks the rule is annoying but doesn't understand its purpose.
Right. Then you need evidence. You need data, not intuition. You can't just say, I feel like 50 meters is fine. You have to bring charts and logs showing here is the data proving that 50 meters still preserves the system's guarantee. Then, and only then, you go to a formal review.
And who is sitting in that formal review?
Leadership. The substrate inventors. The founder. It's basically a tribunal. And they stress test the idea. But here is the key to the whole thing. Leadership has to model intellectual honesty. If the data shows the old rule is wrong, they must change it.
Even if they're the one who wrote the original rule.
Especially they wrote the rule. The documents say leadership's core accountability is to maintain the mythology while knowing it's a mythology.
Wow. That is a heavy, heavy burden for a leader. You have to enforce the rule all day long, act like it's the word of God, and then go into this separate room and be willing to admit that it might be completely wrong.
It requires a rare level of psychological maturity. It's holding two opposing truths at the same time. Yeah. This is engineered, and we will enforce it absolutely. It's what prevents the company from becoming a rigid dictatorship while still keeping the daily operations incredibly tight.
We've talked about the system, the interview, the onboarding, but I want to talk about the actual human being who has to work inside this machine, because ROXY's documents, they're surprisingly honest about the pain involved. They don't try to hide it.
No, they are brutally honest. They don't sell it as some kind of paradise with free snacks and ping pong tables. They explicitly warn candidates about the costs.
They say things in the job description like, you will struggle, you will be uncomfortable.
They straight up admit that working in a system that cannot lie is psychologically exhausting. Most of us, in our day-to-day jobs, we fudge things a little bit.
Sure.
Say, I'll fix that bug later, or it's good enough, or let's just ship it and see what happens. In a substrate system, the system just says error. It rejects good enough. It pushes back on you 100% of the time.
That sounds like an absolute recipe for burnout, just constant rejection by the machine you're trying to build.
It is. They call it constraint fatigue. And that is precisely why they screen for people who can fail without pathologizing their own humanity.
That is a really powerful phrase, pathologizing their own humanity. What does that actually mean in practice?
It means that when that red error box pops up on your screen for the 10th time in an hour, you don't take it personally. You don't spiral down into, I'm stupid, or I'm not good enough for this job. You have to recognize that you are a human being. You're messy, you're biological, you make typos, and you are trying to align with a machine that is, by design, perfect and rigid.
So you need to have strong enough boundaries to know, I am not the error. The code has an error.
If you attach your self-worth to passing the validation check every time, you will be crushed.
You'll crumble in a month.
You'd be a wreck.
Yeah.
You need a certain level of professional detachment.
So what's the trade-off then? Why would anyone sign up for this? Why would you want to work somewhere that guarantees struggle and discomfort?
For that pragmatist we talked about earlier, there is one huge, massive benefit.
Which is?
Silence.
Silence.
The silence of no politics. I mean, think about your own job. Think about how much energy you spend arguing about how to do things, how much time is spent negotiating standards or debating whether to follow the rules, or dealing with that one cowboy employee who just ignores them.
A lot. A huge amount. Why did he get to skip the all-hands meeting? Why did her team get to ship that code without a review?
Exactly. In a substrate system, the system decides. If your code violates the invariant, it doesn't ship. It doesn't matter if you're the CEO or a brand new intern. The compiler does not care who you are.
It takes the human element, the negotiation, out of it.
It removes all of that negotiation energy from the day-to-day work. You are trading your creative freedom for absolute clarity.
We would rather be small and coherent than large and broken.
That is their ultimate motto. That's the choice they've made. They are choosing a specific kind of suffering, the suffering of rigid constraints, over the suffering of chaotic political decay. And for the right kind of person, that clarity is worth all the pain.
It's a bold, bold stance. And as we start to wrap this up, I think we need to zoom out a bit because most of our listeners, they're not building substrate infrastructure. They aren't coding immutable ledgers, but there is definitely something here for everyone.
I think the universal lesson is about the hidden cost of negotiation. We tend to think that flexibility is always a good thing. We want our teams to be agile. But ROXY asks us to look at how much energy those little acts of flexibility actually cost us over time.
That contagion principle can apply to yourself, too, not just a team.
It absolutely does. Every single time you say just this once to a standard in your own life, whether it's a diet or a budget or the time you wake up or a process your team is supposed to follow, you are introducing a tiny fracture.
You're training yourself that your own word is negotiable.
You are. If you let yourself slide on a standard once, you are mathematically more likely to do it again the next time. It's a slippery slope.
So think about your own team. Where are you bleeding energy debating things that should already be decided? Where have you allowed culture to replace hard mechanics?
Maybe you don't need a code validator, but maybe you do need a checklist for projects that is absolutely non-negotiable. Maybe you need to start hiring those brilliant negotiators and start looking for people who quietly respect the craft.
And finally, I want to leave our listeners with that concept of the pragmatist, because I think that is the most powerful and applicable archetype here.
It really is. The person who sees the artificial nature of the rules, who knows the speed limit is just a sign someone put up, who knows the budget is just numbers in a spreadsheet, but follows them anyway.
And not out of blind obedience.
Not at all. But because they understand that for the traffic system or for the family or for the company to function and thrive, we all have to agree to live inside the same hallucination.
So ask yourself, in your work, in your life, are you a zealot, blindly believing the rules are physics? Are you a skeptic, constantly trying to negotiate your way out of them? Or are you a pragmatist, accepting the constraint in order to build something bigger than yourself?
That really is the question.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.